Uh, Welcome to this session of anatomy. As kids, all of you would have wondered what are the primary constituents of the human body. Uh, so, today's lecture is based upon precisely that point. And in future, if anybody asks you how is the human body composed of, or what are the main components of the human body, then you will be able to answer it in a very detailed and comprehensive manner. I am Dr. SB Ray. I am from Department of Anatomy, and let us start the lecture now. So when we look at the human body, we see the skin, we see the hair, we see the eyes, the limbs, etc. And we often wonder that what is a tissue. So when we analyze the definition of a tissue, the tissue is a collection of cells with a common embryonic origin and common functions. So they arise from a common source, and they have common functions. Like if you look at the epithelium, then the epithelium is covering the surface of the body, protecting us from the injury or dehydration. So tissue again is a collection of cells which have common functions, and they are derived from a common embryonic origin. Now, when you look at the different types of tissue in the body, we see that there are four types of tissues. There are epithelial tissue, which is covering the surface of the body. There there is muscle tissue, which is moving the limbs. There is the nervous tissue, which controls our movements, also senses the environment, and the connective tissue. The word connect is actually derived from the Latin word meaning to bind. So the connective tissue actually binds the other three tissues together. So what? It is binding them into what? It is binding them into organs. It is binding them into viscera. Like if we look at the bones of the hand, upper limb, then this here all of you know there is the humerus. So the humerus will be composed of tissues which will be bound together, by the connective tissue. So connective tissue is basically a binding tissue. It gives the shape and form to any organ. It supports the organs from inside. It uh, it is a source of energy because there are a lot of fat which can be stored within the connective tissue. When we say some person is obese, actually we are meaning that that person has extra connective tissue in his body, which is containing lot of fat cells. So and it also has immune function. So these are some of the properties of the connective tissue. Now, as you can see over here, epithelial tissue covers body surfaces. We also have, from the mouth to the anus, we also have a inner lining, inner cavity of the body cavity, and it lines the hollow organs. It will line the mouth, it will line the esophagus, it will line the stomach, etc., like that, the gut. It will also line other body cavities like that of the urinary tract. It will line the thoracic and abdominal cavity, which contains the organs, and we call them the serous membranes. And it also forms the glands. Remember the parotid gland on the face, and below the jaw there is the submandibular and the sublingual glands, which are secreting saliva whenever you are eating your food. So the epithelial tissue also forms glands, and these glands are producing their secretions. Glands, you can also think about the pancreas. You can also think about the glands on the surface of the body, which are the sweat glands. Now, when you look at the connective tissue, as I mentioned before, binds the other three types of tissue together to form organs. It provides immunity. So, whenever there is some infection or something, some attack by a bacteria, virus, etc., it will provide the immunity. It will fight these, and it also stores fat. Muscle, nervous tissue are cells. I'm coming to muscle. Nervous tissue are cells specialized for. Sorry, this is the property of the muscle tissue. The muscle tissue. Just put this arrow over here. The muscle tissues are specialized for contraction. All of you know the movements that we make are due to the contraction of muscles, and during the contraction it also generates heat. You know, now it is the cold season, and if you go outside without proper woolen clothing, you will shiver, and the shivering is actually contraction of the muscles, which produces heat, which warms our body. And finally, when we look, so this is for the muscle, and when we look at the nervous tissue, then basis of our thoughts, whatever we think, our emotions, our actions also bring about contraction of muscle, because the muscles cannot contract by themselves. They have to be innervated by nerves, told by the nerves that this is the time to contract. And so muscle and nervous tissue has a very close interaction among themselves. So I will start from the epithelial tissue, and I have already given you a very brief introduction of the epithelial tissue. You can see that this is an example of an epithelial tissue, and this epithelial tissue is composed of cells. The cells are very closely packed. Each of these is a cell with a nucleus, and the cells are very closely packed. There is very little intercellular space over here. The cell rests on a basal lamina. You can see the arrow over here. This is a kind of platform on which the epithelium rests. Any epithelial tissue will rest. So this is the basal lamina. The cells show polarity. Polarity means the upper surface and the lower surface can't be exchanged. There are some functional specialization on the upper surface, and there is functional specialization. So it is a polar type of cell. So cell polarity. Then the cells can show surface modifications. The surface of the cells can show some modifications, like the microvilli, like the cilia, like the stereocilia. So they can give rise to various types of modifications on the cell surface. You can see in this epithelial tissue there is hardly any blood supply, so it is an avascular type of tissue. And if the epithelial tissue is damaged by some means, you know, whenever we have superficial injuries on our skin, anywhere in the body, then after a few days that injury heals, and after some time there is nothing to show. I mean, majority of the time that there was an injury there. So the epithelial tissue has good regenerative capacity. So if I ask you what are the features or what are the characteristics of epithelial tissue, then these are the characteristics of the epithelial tissue. And if you look at the functions, then obviously the skin, which is also an epithelial tissue, protects us from injury. It is as it is lining our gut, it is helping in the absorption of food, and you know that within the gut, like in the mouth or within the stomach, it is responsible for the formation of glands which will produce mucus. You also know that there are many glands, exocrine glands in our body, like the salivary glands, but there are also endocrine glands in our body, like the thyroid gland, uh, like the pituitary gland, like the anterior pituitary gland. So these glands, which are formed from epithelial tissue, secrete various types of hormones. By the way, do you know what is the hormone released by the thyroid gland? Yes, you are right. This is thyroxine and triiodothyronine. If you look at the adenohypophysis, then some of the hormones would be the growth hormone and the follicle stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone, and so many others, adrenocorticotropic hormone. So all these are produced from the glands, and of course in the gut, it also produces the digestive enzymes, like the pepsin, like the cholecystokinin, like the lipase, which helps in the digestion of food. So epithelial tissue functions. When you look at the functions, then these are some of the main functions of the epithelial tissue. Now, epithelial tissue can be classified uh, in a very detailed manner, in a very comprehensive manner. Now, you can understand that epithelial tissue is all over. It is lining the lungs. It is lining the trachea. It is present on the in the kidneys as in the form of the tubules. It is present within the esophagus. It is present as a lining of the gut. So epithelial tissue, it is also present over the skin, from where the hair is growing. So the epithelial tissue is present all over. So how can we classify it? So basically, we can classify the epithelial tissue into two parts at the beginning. One is the covering or lining epithelium. So one which is covering the body, or which is lining the body cavities, and the other is the glandular epithelium. Epithelial tissue, as I mentioned beforehand, it forms glands. So I will tell you the classification of glands later, but at the moment, the epithelial tissue is covering or lining the body, and basically it can be divided into a simple epithelium and a stratified epithelium. Simple epithelium means it is a single layer of cell. Stratified epithelium means it has more than one layer of cell. Now, once we have classified it into a simple and a stratified epithelium or a compound epithelium, we now look at the shape of these cells. Now, you see this cell is flattened in shape. So, it will be simple squamous epithelium. If it is cuboidal in shape, that is as broad and as tall, then it will be simple cuboidal in shape, simple cuboidal epithelium. And if it is taller, then it is broader, and the nucleus is towards the base, then it will be simple columnar epithelium. Do you know where the simple squamous epithelium will be present? The simple squamous epithelium will be present on the inner lining of the blood vessels, inner lining of the heart, uh, inner lining of the alveoli of the lungs, inner lining of the serous membranes. So there are number of areas where the simple squamous epithelium is present. If you look at the simple cuboidal epithelium, then it is present in the lining epithelium of the thyroid follicles. It is present in the kidney, in the distal convoluted tubule of the kidney, as you can see over here. And if you look at the simple columnar epithelium, then the simple columnar epithelium is present in the stomach. It is present. It is present in the lining of the intestines. Lining of the intestines. It is also present as a lining epithelium of the uterus and fallopian tube. So there are with each of these classification, you need to know 3 to 4 regions where this type of epithelium is present. Now, when we look at the stratified epithelium, then I have already told you before that stratified epithelium is composed of one layer, more than one layer of cell. So if you look at the stratified epithelium, then there will be the stratified squamous epithelium, where multiple layers of cells are present. But if you look at the shape of these cells, based upon which this classification is there, you will see that only the superficial cells are flattened like this. The deeper cells appear to be more rounded and almost like cuboidal or columnar at the bottom. So stratified squamous epithelium uh, is uh, is named or is known from the shape of the superficial cells which are lining the surface of this epithelium. So stratified squamous epithelium, it can be stratified squamous cornified or keratinized. You know, the skin is the best example of that. And stratified squamous non-cornified. The best example will be the mouth and the esophagus. So in this region, and the terminal part of the anal canal also has stratified squamous, non-cornified. So here, in stratified squamous, cornified epithelium or keratinized, cornified and keratinized are the same, has the same meaning. So cornified epithelium means that the superficial cells are dead. They are formed. They have formed scale-like structures with no nucleus or any cytoplasm, and these are gradually they drop out or fall out from the epithelium, and there is a process of regeneration of the epithelium from below. When you look at the stratified squamous non-qualified epithelium, then you will see that the superficial cells are flat, but they are not dead, though there is some kind of disformation of these cells also with the progress of the time, but it is less than where it is quantified. So next time you look into the mouth cavity for the enlargement of the tonsils or the tongue or the follicles of the tongue, you remember that the epithelium over the tongue or over the inside the mouth cavity is stratified squamous, non-keratinized. So then there is stratified cuboidal epithelium. Stratified cuboidal epithelium is present. I don't have a figure over here. A stratified cuboidal epithelium means there will be two layers of this type of cells, and this cuboidal epithelium is usually present in the duct of the sweat gland or the duct of other exocrine glands like the salivary gland or like the pancreatic duct. Stratified columnar epithelium, little bit rare. So this columnar, simple columnar epithelium, you will have 2 or 3 layers of cells, columnar cells, and this type of stratified columnar epithelium, the example would be the urethra, lining of the urethra. You know about the urethra? The urethra leads the urine outside from the urinary bladder, while the ureter links the kidney with the urinary bladder. And then we come to end. So there is stratified squamous epithelium, stratified cuboidal epithelium, and stratified columnar epithelium. Now there is another special type of epithelium called the transitional epithelium. What is the meaning of transitional epithelium? The meaning is that the shape, transition means change. So the shape changes depending upon the content. Depending upon the content. So if you look into the lining epithelium of the ureter and that of the urinary bladder and some parts of the urethra, you will see that if there is urine inside the urinary bladder, then it is the cells are flattened. But when they are empty, when the urinary bladder is empty, the cells become cuboidal in shape. So the shape of the cells keeps on changing depending upon the situation, and because of that, this type of epithelium is called transitional epithelium. The best example of students, the best example of transitional epithelium would be the urinary bladder. Another example will be the ureter. Now, we have now seen that there is a simple epithelium, single layer of cells, and there is a stratified epithelium, multiple layers of cells, more than one layer of cell. Now we come to another type of epithelium, which is called pseudo-stratified epithelium. This you have seen earlier. You have seen here. It is a single layer of cell, but some cells are very short. They don't reach the surface. Other cells are tall. They reach the surface. Those cells which are short, their nuclei lies at the bottom, and those cells which are tall, these cells, the nuclei lie towards more towards the surface. But remember, all cells are touching the bottom, but some of the cells don't reach the surface, other cells reach the surface. So actually it is a simple epithelium, but because when we look at it under the microscope, we see that the nuclei are at different levels. We get the false impression that it is actually a stratified epithelium. To cover up these two contrasting issues, we call it pseudo stratified epithelium. Means false. It is not truly stratified. It is a false stratified epithelium. And the best example would be the epithelial lining of the respiratory tract, starting from the nasal cavities, going to the trachea, larynx, etc. So, pseudo-stratified epithelium. So, sometimes because it is present extensively in the respiratory tract, in the bronchi, so it is often also the pseudo-stratified epithelium is also known as the respiratory epithelium. It is present in the in the lining epithelium of the respiratory tract. So the cells of the epithelium. So you see here the different types of cells. So you might be wondering what keeps these cells in position. So if you look here, then I have two parts of in this slide. In one part, I am telling you about cell junctions. Cell junctions are junctions are the junctions between the adjacent cells on the epithelium in the epithelium, and these cells are bound to each other by specialized junctions called cell junctions. So, and even the cells at the bottom, you know, there is a very nice basal lamina there at the bottom. So, these cells are also bound to the basal lamina again by a specialized junction. So, these cell junctions are actually ensuring that the cells stay together and they don't fall out whenever the organ is contracting or relaxing like that, or when we rub the skin, etc. The cells don't fall out just like that. So let us look at the various cell junctions which are present between the epithelial cells at the sides as well as at the bottom over here. So when we look at the different types of cell junctions, we see that there are tight junctions. Tight junctions means the cells are very closely anchored to each other, and the protein responsible for that is called the claudin, and it can be in the form of a ring, just like we wear a belt around our waist which is going round the waist. Similarly, these junctions can go like a belt on around the periphery of these cells, binding it to the other adjacent cells. So we also call it as zonula occludens. Zonula occludens. See the spelling of occludens, it has a double C in it. So the zonula occludens prevents not only anchors the cell to each other, but prevents the content the fluid or anything which is contained within the organ from coming in between the epithelial cells. So these are the tight junctions. Just below that, you will get another type of junctions which is called the adherent junctions or zonula adherents. And still below that, and these zonula adherents, actually the cells are little bit separated from each other, but there are proteins called cadherins which bind the cells together. What was the protein which binds the tight junctions together? This was called claudin. Here, the adherence junction is bound together by proteins called cadherins, and these catenins actually also bind to microfilaments within the cell, like actin filaments for adherence or like keratin filaments for macula adherence. So, catenins are the main component which is responsible for binding the cells of jonular adherence and for the macula adherence. What is the difference between jonular adherence and macula adherence? The difference is that the zonula adherens also goes like a belt around the cell, around the periphery of the cell, binding it to the other cells. But macula adherens or desmosomes are restricted to small patches. They are not present all around, but they are restricted to small patches on the periphery of the cell, and at those patches, each cell is attached to the other cell. So these are the main, these are the three types of junctions, And if you look at the epithelial layer, then you will usually see, like in the gut, in the lining epithelium of the gut, then you will usually see that the tight junctions are more superficially or towards the surface. Then comes the zonular adherens, and then comes the desmosome. So these three together are called junctional complex. Junctional complex. I have not written this anywhere here, but if you look at this figure, you will see the zonula occludens or the tight junctions, the zonula adherens going like a belt, and you can see the desmosome over here, how they are binding the cells to each other. So these three, one after another, is known as a junctional complex. Apart from this, there is also necessity for the cells to communicate with each other. Not only they need to be bound together to each other, but at many points of time, it is also necessary that these cells communicate with each other through some chemical messengers like calcium. So these cells are connected to each other by special type of junctions called gap junctions, and they are made up of proteins called connexins. So these gap junctions are actually, there are two channel-like structures, one from one epithelial cell, another part from another epithelial cell, and they come together and form a channel which communicates the two epithelial cells. So actually, they are not what we can say to be a stabilizing factor, but rather they are helping the cells talk to each other and organize their metabolic activity in a synchronized manner. So these are the different types of junctions which are present between the epithelium. And uh, we also, when we look at this epithelium, we see in the lower part. Now, when you look at the desmosome, you see there is a specialized part on one cell, and the other specialized part is on the other cell. But when we look at the bottom of these cells, which are resting on the basal lamina, we see that there is only one half of this desmosome. The other half is absent. So this one half of the desmosome is called a hemidesmosome. So you need to remember that the hemidesmosome is usually present at the bottom of the cell, at the floor of the cell, where it is binding it to the basal lamina. So now you know about the various junctions which are present between epithelial cells and which are helping them to stabilize themselves and to maintain the shape, change their shape as and when required. Any viscera, say the stomach, when we take the food, the stomach distends. So the epithelial cells will get stretched out, and these, in the process of stretching out, the cells may get separated, but the cells are held together by these cell junctions. So, and subsequently, when the stomach becomes empty, the cells come back to their original shape because of the presence of these cell junctions. So you need to understand the very great importance of the cell junctions which are stabilizing the epithelium in a very stable manner, in a very comprehensive and effective manner. Now, I have already told you about the polarity of these cells. I've introduced the topic. Now, if you look at these cells, you will see that on the surface of the cells, there are some folding. There are some folding. These foldings are surface modifications. These foldings you will not see at the bottom of the cell. You see the nucleus of the cell towards the bottom. You will not see the nucleus towards the surface. So when you look at a cell, obviously there are certain structures or certain cell surface modifications which are present on one surface only, and they cannot be present on the other surface. This function of the epithelial cells we call as cell polarity. So understand what is the meaning of the term cell polarity. So I will come back again to this cell surface modification. So these small projections coming out from each cell, these actually are called microvilli. These microvilli, these microvilli help to increase the surface area of the cells. Like you can imagine, in the gut, in the small intestine, in the large intestine. These microvilli, these are present. These are present, and these microvilli help in increasing the surface area for absorption of the food material. So I will talk about this more. And this, if these projections are very tall, then they are called. They form what is known as cilia. Microvilli is about microvilli is about 1 micron in length. You know what is a micron? A micron is 10 to the power of -6 meters. So it is a very small unit of measurement. So here the microvilli are about 1 micron in length, but when you look at cilia, which has a totally different structure from the microvilli, it is about 10 microns in length or height. So there is a difference between microvilli and cilia. Again, when you look at microvilli, the interior of the microvilli is supported by a skeleton of actin filaments. But when you look at the cilia, the interior is supported by a skeleton of 9 plus 2 microtubular arrangement. Microtubules are cylindrical structures which are present within the cell, and they give the stability or give the strength to the cell. So the cilia, which are motile, microvilli are not motile, cilia are motile. So microcilia, when they move because of the specific movement of the microtubule which is forming it. So remember the essential difference between the cilia, which is like a typical example of cilia would be in the respiratory tract. So whenever we are inhaling some dust particles or some foreign material, some bacteria, etc., then the cilia, which is present in the respiratory tract, they beat upwards, and they bring up this foreign material into the throat, from where it is either swallowed or it is thrown out. So cilia is a very important component of the epithelial lining of the respiratory epithelium. Now, when you look at the basal lamina, you can see that the basal lamina has two layers. This basal lamina, one is the one will be the basal lamina will be having two layers. In fact, one will be the basal lamina itself, and the other will be the reticular lamina. So you can just think of basal lamina as having two layers: a superficial layer and a deeper layer. The deeper layer is further known as the reticular layer. Now you might be thinking that so the names are somewhat similar. So another term which is often used synonymously with basal lamina is basement membrane. You can see how nicely you can see the basement membrane or basal lamina on which the cells are resting, and the cells are bound to this basal lamina by means of hemidesmosomes. So what is the function of this basal lamina? The basal lamina provides structural support to cells. It provides a barrier to regulate the exchange of molecules across it. And also, if some cells are damaged, then other cells will migrate along this platform. So it is the pathway for cell migration, the basal lamina. Now coming to the cell surface specialization, I have already mentioned to you about the microvilli in the gut, and you can see in between the simple columnar epithelium there are special glandular cells called goblet cells which release mucus. Now you can see these microvilli, and when the microvilli are very nicely arranged, they are usually also known as a brush border, and when they are very little bit irregular in arrangement, they are also known as striated border. So you can see the microvilli how they are arranged, and they can increase the surface area almost 70 to 80 times by their formation. So you can see the best example where microvilli can be seen is in the intestines. So then we come to the cilia. You can see the cilia is much taller than the microvilli. I told you microvilli about 1 micron in length. The cilia are about 10 micron in length. And there are restricted number of cilia compared to the microvilli. There may be about 10 or 20 cilia. So, or even fewer cilia, you will see that the cilia has a skeleton of microtubules, and these microtubules are arranged in a 9 plus 2 arrangement, 9 doublets in the periphery and one doublet in the center. And you can see over here, this total microtubular arrangement is called an axoneme. So, cell surface specializations we are looking at, it can be microvilli like this. It can be a projection from the cell surface called cilia, or even there are projections from the cell surface, but these surface projections are not motile. They are not motile like the cilia, but they are longer than the microvilli. So they are intermediate between the cilia and the microvilli, and they are present in the region of the epididymis, a part of the male genital tract, epididymis. Stereocilia are also present in the internal ear, and remember that they are not motile. They just increase the surface area for the absorption. So here you can see an epithelial surface and the different surface specialization. Some are stereocilia. Stereocilia, stereo means non-motile. Some are having are cilia, and you can also see the microvilli, which are much smaller in size. So I have told you in the beginning that the epithelium also forms glands. So what are glands? Glands are groups of cells that synthesizes substances like hormones, sweat, saliva, mucus, and acids for release into the blood or outside the body or into cavities. And how they are classified? They are classified based upon the number of cells. They can be unicellular, example goblet cell, or they can be multicellular, example the sweat gland. Now you can see the goblet cell over here. It is present in the gut, in say in the small intestine, and you can see that usually there is simple columnar epithelium, but some cells are very much distended, and this distension because of the content of the secretion of mucus, and this mucus later on will be released on the surface where it will have a protective, and it will reduce the friction over here when the food is passing through the gut. So these are the goblet cells. So these goblet cells are unicellular glands. When you look at the multicellular glands, then you can see that the glands can be these multicellular glands can be classified in various ways. If you look at the shape of the secretory unit, you can see that sometimes it is tubular, sometimes it is round. These are all tubular. Sometimes it is roundish, just like a flask. So, based upon the shape of the secretory unit, a multicellular glands can be tubular or can be acinar or alveolar. You can see the acinar, this is tubular, and this is alveolar or acinar, the flask shaped. They can be also classified based upon the branching of the ducts. Here you can see the glands, there is a single duct over here, there is a single duct over here, and there is a single gland over here. There are multiple glands opening into a single duct. So these will be the simple glands, and compound glands means the duct will branch like the tree. So when the duct is branching and each is carrying secretory units within them, it is called a compound gland. Then based upon the nature of secretion, if the gland is secreting serous type of fluid with enzymes and all that, it will be called serous gland. And if it is mainly synthesizing mucus, then it will be called mucus gland. And then based upon the mode of secretion, you can see there are three different types of secretion. Holocrine secretion means the cell is completely the cell is completely destroying itself, completely disintegrating to release the secretion. Like example, sebaceous gland. Merocrine secretion is where the cell is intact and the secretion is poured into the cavity. Let us think about the pancreatic acini. And apocrine secretion is one where the upper part of the cell, the topmost part of the cell disintegrates, the lower part is intact. The upper part of the cell disintegrates to liberate the secretion, and where they are present certain types of sweat glands in the axilla, and also in the mammary gland. The mammary gland produces milk by the apocrine method of secretion. So based upon the nature of the, there are several methods of classifying the exocrine multicellular glands, but you must be aware at the same time that we are talking of exocrine glands, but there are also endocrine glands in the body, like the thyroid, like the parathyroid, like the adrenal gland, which are releasing their secretion into the blood. There is a separate lecture on endocrine glands, so I'm not going into that. Uh, now, that was about epithelium. Now I come to the connective tissue. So when I talk to you about the connective tissue, I would like to tell you that it is having, I have already given you the basis. So main components of connective tissue are cells, fibers, and ground substance. So when you look at the cells, so you can see over here the various nuclei which are stained. You can see the fibers, the brown fibers going here and there. And between the cells and the fibers, there is something transparent which is present over here, that is known as the ground substance. So when we look at the different types, you can see one type of cell is reddish in color. Another type of cell, there is no, the cytoplasm is not stained. There is only the nucleus which is visible. Like mm, these nuclei, you can see them so nicely. These nuclei, only its nucleus is visible. So these cells are known as fibroblast. And then there are other types of cells like macrophages, which is a phagocytic type of cell. It eats up dead tissue, eats up bacteria, etc., destroys them. Then mast cells. These are mast cells. These are very important cells for us and for you students, because these mast cells are responsible for producing allergic responses. Whenever a drug is given to a patient, in a very, very minor percentage of patients, there may be an allergic response to that drug. So, that allergic response to the drug is called hypersensitivity type 1 reaction. And in that allergic response to the drug, or it may be an allergic response to insect bites like the bee bite, or it can be allergic response to the substances inhaled from the atmosphere like pollen, etc. The mast cells are very, very important. They are key elements over here. And what is there in the mast cells? The mast cells contain small, small granules. These granules are about 0.2 micron in diameter, and they are very elaborate number of granules. Large number of granules are present, and these granules have two main components. One is histamine. So whenever the mast cell is irritated, it is activated, it will release histamine. Histamine causes the irritation. It causes the irritation, and it also causes the redness, etc., over present over here. So it also releases another chemical called heparin. You might have heard about heparin. Heparin is an anticoagulant substance, but it is present also within the mast cells granules, and it is released from them. Then there are fat cells, adipocytes, and of course you have heard about leukocytes, that is white blood cells. They are present all over the connective tissue, taking care of any foreign material which might come into the tissue. And I have also mentioned to you about the transparent material which is present in between the fibers. So let us look at the fibers first. The fibers, all these brown fibers which you see going around from one side to the other, these are collagen fibers. Then these thin fibers which you see, they are branching, these are elastic fibers. And there is another type of fibers which are not stained over here, which are called reticular fibers. When you look at the ground substance, then in the ground substance, you will get something called glycoaminoglycans and proteoglycans and water. These glycoaminoglycans and proteoglycans, these are actually sugar components. These are polysaccharides, polymers, large size polymers, and they bind a lot of water within them. They bind lot of water within them. This is made up of sugar residues alone. This is made up of sugar residues and protein and amino acids. So these are known as proteoglycans, and both of these have large number of sulfate groups which binds water in them. So it gives the tissue some form of rigidity. Uh, so what are the functions of connective tissue? It holds the other tissues together in the form of organs. I have already told you. Metabolic support. Remember that epithelium does not have blood vessels, but it requires the nutrition, and also the waste products from the cells have to be taken away. So just below the epithelium, there are connective tissue. So connective tissue has lot of blood vessels. You can see these blood vessels. You can see the RBCs inside them, and these blood vessels provide the nutrition not only to their own tissue but also to surrounding tissues like the epithelial tissue. There is a defense and immune function in the connective tissue. These macrophages are also known as are histiocytes, tissue histiocytes. And what they are up to, they are present over here. And whenever they encounter some dead material or some foreign substance or some bacteria, they will just go near them and engulf them and destroy them. So macrophages have, because for this property, they have a very important intracellular organelle called lysosomes. These lysosomes are actually filled up with large number of hydrolytic enzymes, and these enzymes actually break down break down material which have been ingested by the macrophages. Macrophages are present almost in every tissue of the body. It is present in the skin. These are known as Langerhans cells. It is present in the liver, where they are known as Kupffer cells. It is present in the CNS, where they are known as microglia. It is present in the lung, where they are known as dust cells or alveolar macrophages. So macrophages are present all over the body. So defense immune function, you understand. Also, another type of cell is present in the connective tissue called plasma cell. What is the function of this plasma cell? The plasma cell produces antibodies, and it because it has fat cells, so it is also has a energy reserve. Whenever the energy is depleted, like in between, if there is a long gap between two meals, then the fat cells in the body will be broken down, and it will provide the energy to the body. So, what are the examples? Where do you get connective tissues? Epithelium rest on basement membrane, which is derived from the connective tissue, and superficial fascia is an example of connective tissue. Liver is composed of parenchymal cells called hepatocytes. These cells are held together by connective tissue. So, so you can see the where all connective tissue can be present. So uh, when you look at the organization of the connective tissue, you can see over here that these are mast cells, and this is a plasma cell, and then you macrophages are also here. Let me see. Here is a macrophage, so it has ingested some foreign particle over here. You can see the granules within the mast cell, and you can also see the main cell of the connective tissue, which is the fibroblast. You can see the fibroblast is an elongated flat cell with a spindle-shaped nucleus, and it is lying in close contact with the collagen fibers. All the different types of fibers, all the ground substance that you see, they are produced by the fibroblast. They are produced by the fibroblast. So fibroblast, the name suggests that it is producing fibers. So you can see the collagen fibers very nicely, very thick ones, and you can see the thin branching elastic fibers also, which are purple in color. These are the different types of cells. These are fibroblast, plasma cell, then adipose tissue cell. Adipose tissue is empty in appearance, and then macrophages, which have got these inclusion bodies, and they are actually the lysosomes, which have within which can destroy foreign particles, etc. And then you can see a mast cell over here. It's a little bit large cell, and having granules with the nucleus in the center. You can see the plasma cell, the nucleus in the periphery, and you can also see the lymphocytes, neutrophils, etc., which are migrated from the blood. So this is not for you. You can. This is the in a tissue. You can see the fibrous fibroblast can be active or quiescence or resting. If it is resting, it is known as a fibrocyte. And then we look at the mast cells. So under the electron microscope, you can see the granules of the mast cells. So you see the number of granules which are present over here. This is a special stain which has been used to show the granules of the mast cells. This is a macrophage. You can see the periphery of the macrophage is very much irregular. They are projecting phylopodia, and whenever they encounter some foreign material, they will engulf it. And you can see the lysosomes over here. These are plasma cells. You can see the specific type of nucleus. This is called a clock face nucleus. Clock. See, the nucleus has peripheral aggregations of heterochromatin, so it looks like a clock. And there is a Golgi apparatus over here. And the remaining cell is very basophilic because of rough surface endoplasmic reticulum, which is producing the antibodies, which are protein in nature. So these are some of the prominent features of the plasma cell. Adipose tissue, you can see the cells are very much large in size, and nucleus is pushed to the periphery, and in the center there is a single droplet of fat. Now this type of fat is known as white adipose tissue. They are present in groups. They are present in the superficial fascia. They are present in the region of in certain regions like the axilla, and they are also present around the viscera, and they are said to be supporting the viscera. There is another type of adipose tissue called brown adipose tissue. This brown adipose tissue is actually is also known as a hibernating gland. In brown adipose tissue, the fat is present in the form of multiple droplets. In white adipose tissue, the fat is a single droplet in the center. Nucleus is at the periphery. But in the brown adipose tissue, there are multiple droplets of fat, and there are multiple large numbers of mitochondria. And when necessary, this fat is broken down to produce heat in addition to energy. So when the blood flows through this fat, then the blood takes up this heat from this adipose tissue, and this helps us in combating the cold. You can well understand that this type of brown adipose tissue will be very much frequent in the hibernating animals when they are coming out of hibernation. They are very prominent in human infants, but with the maturity, this brown adipose tissue is majority of it is lost, and it is replaced by the white adipose tissue. So these are some of fibers of the connective tissue: collagen, reticular, elastic fibers. This is not for you. And collagen actually is collagen fibers is made up of a molecule uh, uh, made up of a molecule, and this molecule is actually in the form of a triple helix. And you know the DNA, it is form of a double helix. Here the collagen is the form of a triple helix, and you will be surprised to know that the collagen is the most common type of most abundant type of protein present in the body. So when you look at the fibers, what does the fibers do? The fibers provide a supporting framework for tissues and organs. Reticular fibers is the third type of collagen fibers which are present. So classification of connective tissue. Connective tissue can be classified into connective tissue proper and special connective tissue. So when we are looking at general or connective tissue proper, then it can be loose connective tissue or it can be dense connective tissue. Dense connective tissue can be further divided into regular and irregular. And the examples I have given of each: loose connective tissue where it is present, superficial fascia, papillated layer of dermis; dense connective tissue if the fibers are regularly arranged, example regular dense connective tissue, the example tendons and ligaments; and if the fibers are present in a haphazard manner in three-dimensional orientation, Then there is called irregular dense connective tissue. Example will be the capsule of organs, deep tissue, deep fascia, and it will also be the reticular layer of the dermis. And when you look at special connective tissues, then there is a type of connective tissue which is present in the embryo, which is known as mesenchyme. It is present in the umbilical cord, which is known as the Wharton's jelly. So remember, the umbilical cord is made up of connective tissue, which is a very embryonic type of connective tissue, immature type of connective tissue. Mainly collagen type 3 fibers are present over here, and another name for this is mesenchyme. And other specialized connective tissues are the cartilage, bone, adipose tissue. Cartilage is a type of connective tissue, but it is more firm. It gives the support to the body. Bone is further, it is resilient. It is firm but not rigid. Bone is both firm and rigid because of the deposition of calcium phosphate within it. And then there is adipose tissue. Special adipose tissues are present, like in the superficial fascia, like in the axilla, like around the viscera. And there is also a form of cellular connective tissue called reticular tissue, which is mainly formed of reticular fibers. It is present within organs like the spleen, like the liver, where it gives support to the cells. So this is loose connective tissue, and this is dense irregular connective tissue. This is dense. Look at the original fibers; they are very nicely arranged. Dense regular connective tissue. What is the example? Tendons, ligaments, aponeurosis. Then there will be the dura mater, the membrane which is protecting the brain, the dura mater. So these are examples of dense regular connective tissue. And then this is the extracellular matrix. And this is the ground substance. See how the ground substance looks. It looks like a toothbrush. In the center part is a protein moiety from where various types of polysaccharides are projecting out. So this is called a core protein, and here we have the polysaccharide units. Together, these are known as glycoaminoglycans. So I think I have run out of time now, and I will introduce the nervous system. The nervous system, you can see, uh, the nervous system is comprised of the brain and the spinal cord. This is the central nervous system. And from the brain and spinal cord, various spinal nerves, cranial nerves arise, and these are known as these comprise the peripheral nervous system. Peripheral nervous system also includes the ganglia, also includes the uh, sensory receptors like listeners corpuscle, uh, Pacinian corpuscle, etc. It also includes structures like the muscle spindle, like the motor end plate, through which nerve fibers end on muscles. So, nervous system can be broadly divided into two: central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. So, I have given you examples of I have given you the components of the central and peripheral nervous system. So, here I would like to give you the definition. I'll tell you the definition of the ganglia. What is a ganglia? Ganglia is a collection of nerve cell bodies outside the central nervous system. It is very important that you know the definition of a ganglia. Ganglia are collections of neurons outside the central nervous system. What is the central nervous system? The brain and spinal cord. So anything outside that, if there are neurons present together, they are known as ganglia. Neurons are present together, yes. So this is the human brain. This is the brain which has conquered the space, which is sending, which has sent man to the moon, which has made the computer and the digital software through which I am speaking to you, and you are able to see my lecture and hear my lecture. So this has immense potential, and you can see this is the cerebrum. This has sulci and gyri, and later on we will show you the human brain also, and you'll be surprised to see the complexity of the human brain. Just below that, this is the cerebellum. This is basically for balance and muscle coordination. So when you look at the cerebrum, and here we have the brainstem composed of the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla oblongata. Now, when you look at the cerebrum, we see there are the cerebrum has lobes like the frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe, occipital lobe, and these lobes have different functions. So, occipital lobe is concerned with vision. The parietal lobe is concerned with the space, three-dimensional orientation in the space. It is concerned with different types of sensations that we receive from the periphery. Temporal lobe is concerned with the memory, and also it is concerned with the auditory function. And frontal lobe is the thinking part of the brain. So when you are thinking, or when you are analyzing, when what type of person you are, whether you are a gentle person or you are a good person, whether you are a good person or you are not so good person. So all whatever we are, whatever our personality is, it is being determined by the frontal lobe, which is also the highest center of the brain, which determines our intellect, our intelligence, our personality, and what we are. Everything is determined in this region of the anterior part of the frontal lobe called the prefrontal cortex. Obviously, you will understand that IQ is also largely based upon the prefrontal cortex. Smartness also would be based upon the prefrontal cortex. So, this is if this part is damaged due to some injury or otherwise, then the personality of the person undergoes a radical change. A person who was very gentle, very philanthropic, that person will be converted into a rude, harsh person and a very aggressive type of person. So this is the law which is concerned with our personality. This brain, if you cut it into two parts through the middle, you will see this type of thing. You will see the cerebrum, you will see the cerebellum, you will see the cavity within the brain. These are called the ventricles, and you will see the brain stem. So look at the brain stem, the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla oblongata. Various cranial nerves are coming out from them. Do you know the number of cranial nerves? There are 12 pairs of cranial nerves which are coming out. So I stop over here, and I will continue with this. When I come up to take up my when I come to take my next lecture class, I think next week Monday, I have another lecture class with you on the nervous system. There, I will continue this, and I will also talk to you about the muscular system. Thank you so much for the patient hearing. And if you have any queries, if you have any queries, you can email me. Please note down my email: sbr, that is the initials of my name, underscore aiims at hotmail.com. sbr, s for small, b for big, r for ray, underscore aiims at hotmail.com. If you have any specific queries, you can email me and I'll try to respond to you as soon as possible. Thank you, students.